Hello there. Welcome in Wednesday edition of the show. Glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the new Extra Sports 1300 app, sponsored by Diversus Health, mental health and well-being for all. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics coming your way over the course of the next 3 hours, and I would love to get your take on all of them. The text and the phone line are the same number for your convenience. 719-247-1313, or you could just reach out on social media. I am on X at Gingerly Tweets. Jessica Mendoza, KKTV 11 Sports, set to join me next hour. And we begin. And we could really begin in so many different places. But I want to start with hockey and the Colorado Avalanche. I know what you're going to ask. I know what's on your mind if you're an Avs fan. I need another game. I need another game with Justus Onanen. He needs to start tomorrow night against Utah. And Jared Bednar today on Altitude Radio said he will. I got to see it. I got to see it again. But I'm watching Justus Onanen last night. And we're drawing closer to the point where he becomes the best option for the Colorado Avalanche in goal. Now, I don't think we've seen the last of Alexander Georgiev. I don't believe Capo Kakkonen is going to come in and take Georgiev's place as the backup. We are a long way from Justus Onanen being, a goaltender the Avs can win a cup with. Like, there are levels to this. There are stages. We are within 10 games of the start of the regular season. But what I have seen in 2 games from Justus Onanen, certainly more last night than San Jose, because the level of competition took a step up last night. But what I saw was a very similar performance from Justus Onanen that I saw against San Jose. He's replicating it against better competition, and that's why I say I got to see it again against Utah tomorrow night. Because Utah's a good hockey team. Not the elite, right? But the schedule is what the schedule is. They got Winnipeg coming up in a couple weeks, and we could talk about it then, have Justus Onanen play against them. But for right now, San Jose is about as bad as it gets, but you liked what you saw from Onanen. Play him again last night against Seattle, which is a step up from San Jose, and you saw the same level of performance. And now, tomorrow night, you're going to get him against a better team than Seattle, I believe, in Utah. Here's Jared Bednar talking about what he's seen from Justus Onanen.
He looks sharp, big in the net, square to the shot before it ever even comes, reading the play well. He's not giving up a bunch of rebounds, making all the stops he should make and then some. So, he's played great in these last couple of games. That's why he went back in the net tonight.
And I think Jared Bednar keys on the biggest difference you see watching Justus Onanen playing goal versus Alexander Georgiev. With Georgiev, there's a lot of movement, right? And the best thing a goaltender can do is not move, right? Or move as little as possible. Right? One step, slide over. Be in position. Go down if you need to. Go over, go up. But there's no extra movement with Justus Onanen. He gets to where he thinks he needs to be. He stays there, and then when a shot comes in, he makes a move. With Alexander Georgiev, we've seen a lot of flailing. We have seen a lot of him wildly throwing his stick in a direction or his blocker or pad. It's more under control with Justus Onanen. And look, we can't gloss over the fact that the Avs look much better defensively over the last few games. And that's another thing that they were able to replicate last night. Defensively, it's been better. So it's easier to have no wasted movement, no extra movement. You don't have to fly from one side of the crease to another if the defense is doing their job in front of him. So just like we were talking about Alexander Georgiev a week or so ago about how the defense hasn't been great in front of him, the defense is better in front of Justus Onanen. And that's something that Jared Bednar also pointed out in the postgame last night.
There's more dig-in for sure, more buy-in to get back above pucks and make it tougher for them to get all the way down the ice with any type of time and space. And, when we're making a mistake, our goalies are coming up with the saves now over the last three, which is nice to see.
And obviously, Georgiev was the Anaheim game. But there was a great point on the ESPN broadcast last night. And I liken it to a lot of the quarterback debates that have gone on here with the Denver Broncos, but really any quarterback competition that you see throughout the NFL. And there are certainly some similarities between the goaltending position and the quarterback position in terms of the way we talk about it, in terms of the way we analyze it. But the analyst on the ESPN broadcast last night said, sometimes you have to make the decision on who to start in goal based on the way the team looks in front of him. Right? And how it compares to a quarterback competition. And I remember mentioning this at various times, whether it's Drew Lock versus Teddy Bridgewater, whether it's, Russell Wilson, whether it's this guy or that guy. Certainly we've had enough of these conversations that there are multiple examples of this. But at one time or another, you just start to talk about it looks better. It functions better when there's not a huge gap in talent. Because I would still say Alexander Georgiev is the more talented goaltender. Okay, I haven't seen enough from Justus Onanen to say that he is more talented than Alexander Georgiev. But sometimes if the gap between the two is not that large, you just got to look at how things run and say, if we're not sacrificing a ton of skill in net, which they're not going from Georgiev to Onanen, the fact that it looks better makes a difference. And how much of the Avs being better defensively, especially these last two games, is because of the confidence they have in Justus Onanen. Cale Makar mentioned last night, used the word calm with Justus Onanen. He's calm. Right? Another comparison to a quarterback. Their goalie is calm. So they're calm in front of him. Your quarterback is calm. So the receivers, the offensive line, it calms everybody down. It has that kind of a tone-setting effect. It's looked better. And I may never get to the point this season where I say Eustace Onanen is a more talented goaltender than Alexander Georgiev. But Alexander Georgiev is not head and shoulders better than Eustace Onanen. And right now, the operation of the Colorado Avalanche defensively is better with Eustace Onanen. So perhaps where we're going is that the Avs kind of employ the Boston Bruins blueprint, right? They had Swayman, they had Olmark. They believed in both of them at about the same level, and they just kind of went back and forth throughout the season. Now, I don't love that when the playoffs roll around. I still feel like you got to have a guy. You got to be able to say, this is going to be our goaltender in the postseason. I don't like the switching back and forth in the playoffs, but during the regular season, especially right now, we're in November. Experiment, flip-flop. But the more you're seeing from Eustace Onanen, the more you want to see more of Eustace Onanen. And that's where I am. I'm not at the point where I can say unequivocally that Eustace Onanen is the number one goaltender for the Colorado Avalanche. But I wanted to see more of him after San Jose, and I want to see more of him after the Seattle game, and so does Jared Bednar. And you just listen to the players talk, Jared Bednar talk. There's a real confidence level that they have with Eustace Onanen back there that they did not have with Alexander Georgiev. And that matters. That right now is the most important thing, is how they feel with one behind them in goal versus the other. And we'll talk about it on Friday after Eustace Onanen goes against Utah, and we'll see how it is. But there's no reason for Jared Bednar to go back to Georgiev. And there will have to be a conversation about, where Alexander Georgiev is. Because he hasn't been challenged to this point. There hasn't been another guy in the room that his job is threatened by. And how does he respond? That first time he gets back in goal, whenever Jared Bednar decides it's the time, is going to be fascinating to watch. Could it be just the thing that he needs? And they ride Eustace Onanen for a while, and it feels good. They go back to Georgiev. He puts up a great effort, and then we're back to Georgiev being 1A. It's possible. But right now, it's Eustace's net. There's just no reason whatsoever to go away from him right now. And I thought he was really good last night. And he was even really good. That last power play that Seattle had, that was an impossibly long time to be on your toes in your own end. The Kraken had the puck for the rest of that game once they drew that last power play. And eventually they did score to make it a 3-2 game. But Annunen made a couple of big saves in that sequence. In a long time to be ready for a shot opportunity. So I actually came away with that last sequence more impressed with Justus Annunen. Because that kind of situation would have led to a goal earlier with Georgiev. At least the way he's been playing. So I'm not at the point where I say, yeah, Annunen's the guy. But we're getting there. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the Avs win last night. Annunen will start tomorrow night against Utah. Is that the right call? And are you sold? Have you seen enough? Take your thoughts on that. Just getting going on this Wednesday edition of the show. Coming up next. Yes, it happened last night. Shockingly, of course. The fact that the Griffies were in the building last night, they were going to follow around the Lakers like the Maris family followed around Aaron Judge. Okay. We were going to see LeBron and Bronny in the game last night. It played out almost exactly as I said it would. And I have some thoughts next on Extra Sports 1300. Nothing beats a Nuggets night out. This special offer includes a $17 arena credit with each ticket purchased. Arena credit can be used for food, drinks, or merch. Great for girls, guys, or family night out at Ball Arena. Grab your crew and get tickets now at nuggets.com. I believe November 2nd is the first Nuggets night out at Ball Arena. Of course, tomorrow night, the Nuggets open with the Oklahoma City Thunder. Last night, the NBA season had their official opening. And the big story, of course, was the first father-son duo to appear in an NBA game together. And it played out almost exactly as I said. They would check LeBron out, and then when he would come back in, they would bring Bronny with them. That way they could announce it on the PA. They could have that moment. They weren't going to sneak him in after a timeout or start a quarter with him. They wanted the announcement that both LeBron and Bronny James were coming into the game at the same time, and we got it with about 4 minutes left in the second quarter. Bronny played 3 minutes, almost made a three, and then that was it. Now, listening to LeBron James after the game talk to Taylor Rooks, as a father, I thought it was really cool listening to LeBron talk, and he's talking about the amount of time that he has missed from his kids' lives, not just Bronny, but Bryce and his daughter as well, because of the amount of time he is dedicated to his profession. And I think if you are a working parent, you can feel that, especially if you're in a career that demands almost round-the-clock dedication to it, the way that being a professional athlete would. So I'm listening to him talk, and I said, you know what? I'm glad that he had that. I'm glad that he had that moment, because I can empathize with him as a father, maybe lamenting some of the time he lost during his career with his kids. However, last night was a completely contrived, staged photo op that probably should have never happened. Right? And you know why. All of this kind of feels fake in a way. Right? And it like, again, I'm glad that LeBron got that moment. Okay, because he has given so much to the sport of basketball. But I'm almost like, I don't know, could it be accomplished by allowing one of his sons when they were younger to be like the ball boy for a year, like being able to hang out with his kid? Like it was take your son to work day. And it's cool for LeBron. But it was such a, I mean, it was like just for him. That's the feeling I got. I don't even know if Bronny, and I'm not saying he has any, ill will towards his father or anything like that. I'm sure he loves his dad very much and did think that it was cool to a degree, but it just felt like this is all for LeBron. It's not about the Lakers. It's not about Bronny. It's not about the NBA. It's about LeBron. And that's where more of my cynicism, more of my criticism comes into play, because I get it. He's a 20-year-old kid just stepping onto the NBA court for the first time. He just looked like he didn't belong. If you watched the game last night, didn't you feel that? And even the optics of him sitting on the bench, like sandwiched between Rui Hachimura and another Lakers player, and he just looks so small. And I couldn't shake this feeling last night of this shouldn't be happening. Bronny shouldn't be here. And it's nothing against Bronny, right? And I don't want to be too critical of Bronny, because I don't think much of this was his own making. It was his father and Rich Paul acting on behalf of his father. Bronny is blameless in all of this. I'm not going to call him a victim because he's getting paid, what, $2.5 million or whatever. But it just, I almost got the sense that he's just going along with it. Not that he doesn't take some pride in and think it's cool and everything, but it just felt so about LeBron. And there's a reason, because it is. And I think, look, he got that moment, and now we can move on. And my thing is, we shouldn't even see Bronny. Bronny James should go down to the G League. And he should play. Because I'm not saying that he can never be an NBA player. I don't want to put that on him. But he's not one right now. And this is not about, who's he taking a spot from? I'm looking at it from the perspective of, if this is a real dream of Bronny, he has been given a wonderful opportunity, an opportunity that would not be afforded to him if his name was Bronny Smith. Right? And I want him to be able to take advantage of it. And I don't see how he would take more advantage of it sitting at the end of the Laker bench for 81 more games and maybe getting in for a minute or two in a blowout along the way. The whole thing about Bronny James is that he's not one of these phenoms that can go one and done in college. You watch this guy, and on a mediocre USC team, he didn't get minutes. And you could say that it was, the cardiac arrest that he had in the offseason. Okay, but it still proves my point that he needs to play. If Bronny James is going to be anything other than a prop, then he needs to go away from the Lakers. And he needs to play. And the only place that is fit for him to play right now is in the G League. And I'm not trying to dismiss the G League. There are a lot of guys that we see. Think of Matt McClung, the slam dunk champion. Like, he's been grinding away down there. And now guess what? He's going to be on the Magic roster. It's a viable path. It's a narrow path, but it's viable. You had your moment, LeBron. Okay? The Griffies were there. The Nike cameras were there. You got the PA announcement. You got Iron Eagle on the TNT broadcast. You had the NBA on TNT crew like awkwardly stumbling through like their admiration for the moment. Like, it was all very contrived and quite awkward because you just knew that he shouldn't be there. And I think it's going to be very telling moving forward what this is truly about, because the Lakers will have you believe that they are legitimately intrigued by Bronny's upside and by his skill set. This guy has zero chance to be a regular contributor to the LA Lakers this season. And when you have a guy like that, you send him to the G League. Right? You bring him back and forth at the very least. But if this is really about basketball, and I am highly skeptical, but if there is any chance that this is actually about basketball and this is actually about the Lakers trying to develop a young player to be able to contribute at some level in the NBA, then Bronny needs to go away and to be away from the Lakers more than he's there. Because the more that he's there and he never even unzips his warm-up and he's sitting there at the end of the bench and the cameras pan to him, because you know they will, it will just look like he's a prop for his father's whatever this part of his LeBron's career is. And I don't want that for Bronny. And I don't know the guy, but everything I hear from him is that he wants to be an NBA player. The Lakers should give him that opportunity. Not for a photo op, but like putting him in the G League with other guys trying to grind and make their way to the NBA. Put him there, let him play more basketball, play it against professional athletes, and develop this guy. And maybe he can still appear some other times with LeBron James. But now, last night was about LeBron. Is it going to be about Bronny moving forward? That's the question I have. I'll take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, another wide receiver is on the move. And if the Broncos don't get in on the trade market, what does that say about how they feel about their chances this season? 719-247-1313 is the text and the phone line if you want to interact with the show. From the 719, I have no hard feelings for his son being Bronny at all because he is there and making $2.5 million. Everybody would do what he's doing. And that's why I say, and I try to be careful. I can assess Bronny James as a basketball player. I think that that's fair. Right? And my assessment of him is that he is not an NBA player. That I think that is fair criticism that I could say about a player on Air Force's team or CU's team or CSU's team. Like that's in bounds. I've tried to be careful about criticizing Bronny during all of this because he's not orchestrating this. This is not him. Listening to Bronny speak, I don't think for a second that he went to his dad and said, "Hey, Dad, get me drafted. I want to play with you." This has been LeBron starting with the tweet a couple years ago where he's talking about how Bronny could cook some of these dudes in the league. Okay, this has been orchestrated by LeBron James and by Rich Paul on LeBron's behalf. I do not think that Bronny is the one pulling the strings here. And it would, to the texter's point, it'd be very difficult for me, even if it was for a photo op, for a prop, to turn down $2.5 million. You think Bronny's at 20 years old is going to stand up to his father and to Rich Paul and say, "No, I don't want any of this"? I don't feel bad necessarily for Bronny collecting a $2.5 million paycheck. Okay. And I don't blame him for taking it either. But I look at the Laker organization and I say, you tried to sell us a bill of goods on draft night or draft day. It was the second day of the draft, saying that you were genuinely intrigued by Bronny's upside. Tell me how he reaches that upside, taps into that, sitting on the very end of the Laker bench, sandwiched between two players and playing for 2 minutes once every 15 games. I don't think it is. And that's why I say, if it's really about Bronny, if you do have some curiosity, if you do think there's something there, do what teams do with guys in Bronny's situation. Send them to the G League. Let him play basketball, because that's the biggest thing with him, is that he needs to play basketball. He just didn't play a lot at USC. It's not like he went into USC, was a starter, played a ton of minutes, and then came out. Guy barely played and wasn't that effective when he was on the floor. I am highly skeptical that Bronny James is going to turn into anything at the NBA level, even a bit role player. But if the Lakers really think that he's capable of that, the way to go about it is to let him play basketball. Competitive basketball, not being, on the scout team in practice. We'll find out here pretty soon. If Bronny just sticks on the bench, then this was what I kind of think it is, what I kind of know it is, all about LeBron and not about Bronny. And that's kind of a shame. All right. Trade, another notable trade going down in the NFL today, or at least reportedly. The Kansas City Chiefs are going to get DeAndre Hopkins from the Tennessee Titans. And the visceral reaction people have is how can and they look at what the Bills did on draft night, allowing the Chiefs to move up and draft Xavier Worthy. And they're saying, how can you let the Chiefs do this? Okay. What do the Titans care about how this impacts the ability of the Kansas City Chiefs to three-peat? The Tennessee Titans are going nowhere. And they're trading DeAndre Hopkins out of division to a team that is light years in front of them. They do not care one bit. If you want to do that to the Buffalo Bills and say, hey, you're going to be going through this team, why are you letting them go up and get their player of choice in the draft? I can understand that to an extent. But getting on the Tennessee Titans, what do they care? Patrick Mahomes is going to be retired before the Tennessee Titans are any good. But also let's just pump the brakes a little bit on this being the missing piece to return the Chiefs back to the offensive juggernaut they used to be. It's a good fit. It's a very good fit. Certainly DeAndre Hopkins is better than anybody the Chiefs have at the wide receiver position healthy right now. So I get that. It's a good trade by the Kansas City Chiefs. But look at the compensation. Okay? Sometimes the price tag matters. He's going for, a fifth-round pick that can turn into a fourth? Let's not sit here and act like this is DeAndre Hopkins from 4 or 5 years ago, okay? Like, it's a good piece. It's a good fit. There's no doubt that the Chiefs' wide receiving core is better with him than they were without him. But I keep saying this, and you should have seen it on Sunday against the San Francisco 49ers. The biggest issue with this Chiefs team is not the players that Patrick Mahomes is throwing to. He has made it work with Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Juju Smith-Schuster, Sky Moore. Like, I'm sorry, Patrick Mahomes will make it work with anybody. The biggest issue with the Chiefs is their tackles. And it reminds me of the team that lost to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And if you remember, that Chiefs team had some weapons in the passing game. It didn't matter because Patrick Mahomes was under constant duress. I look at this a little bit like the Devontae Adams deal with the Jets. Like, is the Jets offense and their wide receiving core better with Devontae Adams? Of course it is. Of course it's better. Or it's going to be better. It didn't look that much better against Pittsburgh, but it's going to look better. You know that. But is it really addressing what ails the New York Jets right now? No. And I look at the same way with the Chiefs. I understand why people are freaking out about it. I understand why it's notable. It's a big name. And it will look a little bit better. It will. But the Achilles heel of this Chiefs team is their tackles. And if they get into a Super Bowl matchup with a team with elite pass rushers, like if San Francisco can find their way out, or if the Lions pull off the trade that everybody wants them to pull off and land Max Crosby, the Vikings, if they meet up with them, the Packers, these are all teams that, well, the Lions obviously would have to get Max Crosby, but the Vikings, the Packers, the 49ers, they're very good pass rushing teams and can give the Chiefs some problems. DeAndre Hopkins, this isn't signed, sealed, and delivered a three-peat acquiring DeAndre Hopkins. That's my point. And I've seen it enough with these acquisitions that the Chiefs make And I get Hopkins is better than Kadarius Toney. But we have these conversations anytime the Chiefs land anybody that can catch a pass. And it's like, oh no, you gave Patrick Mahomes another weapon. DeAndre Hopkins will be a decoy on Sunday if he even plays. And they'll bring him out every once in a while on a critical third down just to show that hey, we got this guy. I don't expect Patrick Mahomes and DeAndre Hopkins to suddenly turn into Patrick Mahomes to Tyreek Hill. Okay, it's still Travis Kelce. He's their best pass-catching weapon. The best part of this Chiefs team outside of Mahomes is their defense, and their biggest weakness are their two tackles. And last time I checked, DeAndre Hopkins can't block a pass rusher coming around the edge. I understand the visceral reaction, but I do not. If you think that this gives the Chiefs a three-peat, then you have to be honest with yourself and say you already expected the Chiefs to three-peat. Because DeAndre Hopkins isn't making the difference. Now, that is 3 wide receivers of note who have been dealt. Cooper Kupp is on the trade block. Mike Williams could be on his way out. And you notice the teams that have made these acquisitions. The Jets, the Bills, the Chiefs. The teams that are rumored for Cooper Kupp or Mike Williams, the Steelers. What do these teams have in common? They are either in reality contenders or they believe they're contenders. And really, the believe they're contenders is more for probably the Jets more than anybody else. But they think they're in it. And they're making moves to say, hey, we're going after this thing. We're all in. Right? Which a phrase that Jerry Jones has completely ruined because nothing that he did this offseason could be construed as all in. But all's still quiet on the Broncos front. Like, very quiet. Why is that? I think it says something. If the Broncos do not make a move like this, like we've seen over the last couple of weeks, I think it does say something about how the Broncos view themselves. And I'll get into that after the top of the hour. But in the meantime, if you haven't noticed, the line has moved a little bit in Sunday's game based on some news that I also want to bring you after the top of the hour regarding the Carolina Panthers. But the Broncos are now favored by 10 on Sunday. 10. And I got that line straight off of Circa Sports Colorado app. And if you go there, if you download the app and you place your bet, you'll notice it's a minus 110 split either way. Carolina plus 10, Denver minus 10. And you're going to find that with a lot of their lines because that's what Circa Sports Colorado strives to do. Other sports books will do minus 115, minus 120. It's just their way of getting a little bit more out of you. With Circa Sports Colorado, it's about the experience. They want you to have the best experience betting that you possibly can. And it's also why they keep as little money as possible on large market bets like futures and golf tournaments. And it's why they don't limit players based on their winnings. So do what I did. Download the app. Don't even delete the other app that you may have. Compare and contrast. Do some price shopping. That's what I did. And now I do just have Circa Sports Colorado on my phone. Download the Circa Sports Colorado app today. Must be 21 years or older and present in Colorado to bet. Gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Drive Time Sports. Welcome in. Ryan Kaufman with you on this Wednesday. I will be joined in 20 minutes by Jessica Mendoza of KKTV 11 Sports. And I'd love to be joined by you at some point during the program. You can text or call in your thoughts at 719-247-1313. And don't forget, If you're not on the app or by your radio, you can always watch the show on a daily basis on our social media platforms at XTRA Sports 1300, Facebook, Instagram, X, and YouTube. So DeAndre Hopkins is going to be a Kansas City Chief. Amari Cooper is a Buffalo Bill. Devontae Adams is a New York Jet, and we may not be done. About a week and a half away from the NFL trade deadline. I mentioned this before the break. Look at the teams that are making these moves. Look at the teams that are linked with some of these other receivers like Cooper Kupp and Mike Williams. What do they all have in common? They believe they are contenders. Whether you believe it or not is, with all due respect, irrelevant. And if I believe they are or not is irrelevant. They think that they are contenders. Jets, Bills, Chiefs, Steelers. These teams that are either rumored to be after these wide receivers or have already gotten them. Now, I have been led to believe that the Denver Broncos are a legitimate contender for the postseason. Shouldn't they be linked with some of these guys? Shouldn't they be interested? And I'm not saying every single one of them would be a fit. You know, you got to think about fit with your team, but not one of these guys. Have you seen legitimate, not some Bronco fan account saying, oh, they got to go after so-and-so? Have you seen any NFL insider, any ESPN show link the Broncos to any of these guys? Yesterday, I talked about David Njoku. And now that's becoming very much a thing with Broncos fans, and for good reason. David Njoku would be an amazing acquisition for the Denver Broncos. I haven't seen the Denver Broncos actually linked to him. Why is that? If the Denver Broncos do not make a move to acquire a player that has the ability to catch the football, then I believe that means the Broncos don't believe they're contenders. I think it does say something about where they feel they are at. Read a piece today on ESPN. Dan Graziano thinks that pretty well-connected NFL insider thinks that the Broncos aren't going to do anything. In fact, there's more talk about the Denver Broncos shipping out players than acquiring them. Why is that? These NFL insiders don't pull things out of thin air. Now, you have to be wary of where they're getting this information from. But let's not sit here and say that outside of Patrick Surtain, that the Denver Broncos have anybody that these other teams are dying to acquire. Okay, so if there's some noise about maybe the Broncos listening on Courtland Sutton or on Javonte Williams, I think that more comes from the Broncos side than any other team, because We still haven't. Cortland Sutton still hasn't cracked the list of the best available wide receivers. Okay, we still have Kupp. We still have Mike Williams. If the Broncos don't make a deal before the trade deadline, I think it's because they believe they're not a real contender for the postseason. Now, with the 7th seed in both conferences, there could be a team that is in this weird limbo between being a real playoff team and not a playoff team, right? And we see this every year. The 7th seed in at least one of the conferences, you look at it and then they have no business being here. It's like there's 6 teams that you're like, they are playoff teams, and then there's this one, and it's every year in one or the other conference, sometimes both. But you look at it and you're like, that team's in. And then usually their first playoff game, they get absolutely smoked. And you're like, yeah, this is just the NFL watering down its own product. If the Denver Broncos go out and make a move, that's them saying we're ready to compete now. Not, hey, we might sneak into the playoffs. Like, we're going for the playoffs. We're going after it, and we're going to get this guy that helps us. Because you can't look at this Broncos roster, and I've been saying it. You can't look at this Broncos roster and be like, playoff team, unequivocally. They're not. The way that you build up the Denver Broncos is by tearing down other teams. Well, Anthony Richardson doesn't look very good for Indianapolis, so the Chiefs could win that, or the Broncos could win that game. The Browns are an absolute mess, so the Broncos can win that game. And I don't think that conversation is wrong, because I look at their schedule and I'm like, well, this team I don't feel nearly as good about as I did going in the season. I think that the Browns are a great example of that. I was not taking the Browns to win their division or to go to the Super Bowl or anything, but certainly I thought they would be better than this. The Browns are going to be in line with the Carolina Panthers and the New Orleans Saints. Well, we'll see if Jameis Winston has some magic with this team, because he's now going to be the starter. But from what I've seen, it's like, well, this Cleveland Browns team is not nearly what I thought it would be going into the year. And if they're able to take advantage of a bad schedule and beat all of these garbage teams, does that mean, and they happen to get the 7th seed, it feels a little bit different. If the season ended today, they would play the Texans. They would get smoked by the Texans. But even for this team to get into the playoffs, I still think they need to add something. They need to add another dynamic to this team, because the team I'm watching is, yes, better, maybe much better than I thought they would be. I think that's fair. I think they have exceeded my expectations. But there are levels to this, and they're not at the level where I watch this team and say they're a playoff team. But if they added something else, like a David Njoku, even if you set your sights lower because maybe the Browns don't want to deal him, add a Mike Williams. There could be something. Cortland Sutton had no targets in a game where everything seemed to work for the Denver Broncos. Cortland Sutton didn't get a look once. Everybody ate except Cortland Sutton against the New Orleans Saints. You like what you've seen from Troy Franklin. I think there's a good reason to give him more and more time for Bo Nix to look his way a little bit more. But Troy Franklin isn't alone going to make the Broncos a playoff team. They need to bring in something. They need to add something. And every week that goes by, that Bo Nix doesn't get better as a pocket passer, because that's the other part here. If Bo Nix adds something to his game from what we've seen, then that could be something else. But wouldn't you argue that adding another quality pass catching weapon could help Bo Nix develop that? I'm at the point where it's been radio silence with the Denver Broncos, and it is really confounding at why that is. All these other teams that at least believe they're in the playoff chase, think that they're playoff teams, are making these kind of moves. And the Broncos aren't. And don't give me the financial stuff, because the financial stuff is not as bad next year. Okay, they can afford one of these guys. Don't tell me that they can't. So it's not finances. It's not the Russell Wilson cap. Now, they can't go crazy and add a ton of different players, but they can make one of these moves like the Bills did, or the Jets did, or the Chiefs did. If they don't make a move between now and the trade deadline, I think that it's because they don't really think that they're a playoff contender, and they just want to continue to develop their young players, develop Bo Nix. And if they happen to back their way into the postseason by taking advantage of some teams on their schedule that are not nearly as good as we thought they would be going into the year, then great. And it's still possible they could achieve that. But that's not them going for it. There's a difference in making a move when it seems like there are a lot of guys available. Don't tell me it's because they don't like Mike Williams, or they don't like DeAndre Hopkins, or they don't like, come on. I don't know how much the Carolina game is going to move them closer to that direction. You're not going to get the benefit of them playing, both of these games against the Chiefs and the Ravens and say, oh, well, then now we're ready because we knocked off these teams. You're going to have to kind of decide now, or decide after the Carolina game. But very conspicuous that the Denver Broncos have not been seriously linked to any of these guys. I'll take your thoughts. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, Bryce Young will start for the Carolina Panthers. Andy Dalton suffered a thumb injury in the accident he had yesterday. Does that make Jessica Mendoza of KKTV 11 Sports more confident that the Broncos will win on Sunday, less confident, or the same amount of confident? She joins me next. Some unexpected change at quarterback for the Carolina Panthers for Sunday. Andy Dalton involved in the accident yesterday, apparently injured his thumb, and Dave Canales, the head coach of the Carolina Panthers, says it's time to go back to Bryce Young. What impact may that have on Sunday's game? Joining me now to discuss is Jessica Mendoza of KKTV 11 Sports. She joins us on behalf of Prize Picks, where you get $50 instantly when you play $5 as long as you download the app and use promo code Jessica. Jessica, how are you today?
I'm doing good, Ryan, and actually I had a big win on Prize Picks last night, so I'm doing even better now that the NBA season is back and we're rolling with sports every night of the week here.
Did you bet Bronny under 1.5 points last night? Well, what was it on Prize Picks that you got right?
No, so we had a free square with Anthony Edwards getting 1 point, so that's always helpful. Anthony Davis getting 12.5 rebounds. And Naz Reid, he was slow early in the game, but he ended up getting more than 11.5 points. So a big win for me there last night. So I definitely encourage people listening to go check out Prize Picks. It's a great app, and I've been really having a fun time with it so far.
Yeah, Anthony Davis was a beast last night. I wonder, as the Nuggets get set to get underway tomorrow night, and my biggest reaction to the Karl Anthony Towns trade was, I think that the Wolves aren't quite as difficult of a matchup for the Nuggets as they were. It's not to say that the Nuggets are going to mop the floor with them. Like, they still have Anthony Edwards and Naz Reid and, all those guys. I get that, but I would just kind of tilt things a little bit more in the Nuggets' favor. And then watching Anthony Davis last night just go right at the front line of Minnesota of Julius Randle and Rudy Gobert, I'm like, what's going to stop Jokic from doing exactly that?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. Corey, our weekend sports anchor here, he just came in and he said his hot take for the season is the Timberwolves might be a 7 seed in the West this year. I think they're going to figure it out. I think it's kind of similar to what we've heard the Nuggets say in the preseason, bringing in these new pieces. I mean, I know that the T-Wolves had to do that a little bit last year as well, but for the Nuggets, they haven't done that in so long. They're still working on that chemistry side of, bringing in some of these big players. And so I think the T-Wolves are going to figure it out. I think any team Anthony Edwards is on is going to be a threat for sure. But you're right. When it comes to that matchup with Jokic, I think the Nuggets definitely are going to have the upper hand this season.
And I do want to talk about the Bryce Young news and everything like that, but let's just stay on this a little bit because the Nuggets do open up tomorrow night against Oklahoma City. What is kind of your feeling? I'm not trying to get a prediction out of you, but just, losing Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and then there was some consternation about re-signing Jamal Murray, and now they get that Aaron Gordon deal done, and, they're a couple of seasons removed. I'm just saying, from I guess your anticipation level regarding your excitement level, just how are you feeling on the eve of the Nuggets season with everything that has transpired over the past, 6 or 7 months?
Yeah, I'm feeling really excited about the Nuggets this year. I mean, I think I have for the past 5 years, but I think it's really great to see that they're locking down their key players, their big role players, through almost 2030 at this point. I think that shows that they understand, that their championship window is only so big and they want to capitalize on that. And I think that bringing in Dario Saric and Russell Westbrook this year was huge because, like I said, they haven't done that in the past few years, bringing in guys that are going to come in off the bench and actually provide something and give their guys rest. And that's something that's just stuck with me since that horrific loss in the second round last year is Coach Malone saying, we do need to rest our stars a little bit more during the regular season. And I applaud the Nuggets for not doing that as much as other teams have in recent years and recent seasons. But I do think it's going to pay dividends when it comes to the postseason to have Jokic have a little bit more rest, have Jamal Murray have a little bit more rest as far as not being injured and actually just having time when he's healthy to be rested. But I also think a really big thing is going to be, some of those younger guys from last season, like Julian Strother. Coach Malone says he's going to have such a big role this year in terms of scoring, and that he can be used no matter who's on the court, whether it's, their starters or some of those guys who are going to come in later. He made such an impact. Yes, it was in preseason, but I think he's starting to have more trust in some of these younger guys. I think the big question mark is Christian Braun and what he can do, with the other starting four, and just how he's going to look, going into the season. So that's kind of the big question mark for me. Not that Christian Braun has given me any reason to question him, but he's going to be taking on a bigger role this season. So that's what I'm eager to see when it comes to tomorrow night against OKC.
Would you put him at the top of your list in terms of the players you're most interested in seeing tomorrow night and early in this season, or would it be maybe Russell Westbrook? I mean, you mentioned a lot of players that are obviously question marks, but also kind of fascinating. Which one would you put at the top of the list that you're most interested to see in a real game tomorrow night?
Yeah, it sounds weird, but it would be Christian Braun, and he's nothing new to this team. He's been a great position player for the Nuggets, and he's that dog on defense. But I think it is a question mark for me because we've seen some stats come out about how he is when he plays with those other four key pieces and the starters for the Nuggets. And he hasn't been great with them. And I know part of it is because, he's great at sharing the ball and he's used more on the defensive end, but I think he's going to need to be a scorer as well. So I am very interested to see how that will work out. But of course, I want to see how they're going to use Russell Westbrook, how much he's going to be utilized. And just going back to that chemistry piece, I know that's kind of surface level, but it is very important. And so just figuring out how quickly they can get adjusted to having a personality like that on the court, I think will be interesting.
Jessica Mendoza, KKTV 11 Sports, my guest. So, I mean, kind of when the news came out yesterday, it was like scary, like, oh my goodness, that, Andy Dalton and his family are in an accident. Thankfully, none of them had to be transported to an emergency facility. So a big sigh of relief there. But now Andy Dalton's thumb apparently got banged up in the accident, and now it's back to Bryce Young for Carolina. Does that make you, because maybe I'm making an assumption here that I shouldn't, I would think you expected the Broncos to win either way, but the swapping out Andy Dalton for Bryce Young, does it make you even more confident? Does it make you a little less confident? How do you kind of process Sunday's matchup, given that it'll be Bryce Young now and not Andy Dalton as we expected?
Yeah, I think it swings more in the Broncos' favor. I think this is a staggering stat that I saw on Twitter this morning. Bryce Young is 0-9 on the road in his career. So I think that's definitely something to look at. And of course, all streaks have to come to an end at some point. But obviously, Canales made the change earlier this season to go with the veteran because he didn't like what Bryce Young was doing. And I think, there's a lot of problems over there in Carolina. And I think, the Panthers could, of course, be better around him. But I think the Broncos are right now just focusing on themselves, trying to get better right now, no matter who's in at quarterback. And I think what they can do on offense this Sunday is going to be crucial. But it did make me wonder why Canales already announced that. I don't think he had to do that this early. So I think that gives the Broncos a major edge to, instead of preparing as they were going to for two quarterbacks, now they just have to focus on Bryce Young. So thank you, Dave Canales, for that early information. And I think that's going to definitely work in the Broncos' favor for sure.
Yeah, and I caught a little bit of Sean Payton. He's got this bad habit of talking when I'm talking, so I don't get to listen in on his press conferences. But I heard the part where he's talking about Bryce Young, and he's like, now we're going to flip. And it's like, yeah, you're right. I mean, I guess you could say, look, are we making too much of this? It's Carolina one way or another. The Broncos should not lose this game. But it is kind of weird for Sean Payne to be able to sit up there on Wednesday and be like, yep, we're just going to flip everything now.
Ryan, I have to ask you something real quick. Have people told you that you look like Andy Dalton before?
Yes. Yes, they have, as a matter of fact. Yeah, they have.
Well,
You're saying that that's a thing around here, right?
no, I didn't know. We have some folks here at KKTV that ask me every Monday, is Andy Dalton coming in today? I would say it's a compliment, Ryan.
Okay. Well, good. You made me feel so. Yesterday, not to go too far off of course here.
Yeah, sorry.
So no, it's fine. It's me that's straying off course. So my brother, who also has red hair, texts me a picture of Andy Dalton, and he's like, "Is this you?" And I'm like, "Come on, dude. Like, you're redheaded. Like, we don't want to be reduced to people just looking at our hair color and saying that we resemble every other redheaded person." But he did also point out that Andy Dalton had a scowl on his face, and that is what I am also known for,
gotcha.
is that I'm a little less plucky, I suppose, than my brother is. So that was the other part. So I'm already – it's been a trying week, to be honest with you, Jessica. It's always a difficult week for me when Andy Dalton is in the news. It's okay.
I'm so sorry to bring it up. I didn't know if we had talked about that before, but
we have not.
It came up, I was like, I have to ask.
Yes. I have been told before I have a striking resemblance towards Andy Dalton. I don't quite see it, but I do understand why some people would go in that
Yeah, but
direction.
I mean, getting back to the meat, right? Trying to kind of go off on what you were trying to ask me. I think no matter who Carolina was going to have at quarterback, this is a team that has a -6 turnover margin. And the Broncos defense right now leads the NFL in quarterback pressures. We're talking about Zach Allen, who's got the most quarterback hurries in the NFL, and Nick Bonito with 5 straight games with a sack. So no matter who it was going to be, they were going to be facing a lot of adversity on Sunday. But like I said, I think it definitely swings a little bit more in the Broncos' favor, having Bryce Young being the starter on Sunday.
Do you think, I'm going to get a prediction out of you, do you think that the Broncos acquire somebody before the trade deadline?
I do think that they should. And we've seen Sean Payton, earlier in the season, he likes to bring a lot of people in during training camp. As far as, I think if they win this game, there's no reason why they shouldn't. And he kind of mentioned it today. He called it homecoming, and everyone's getting their feelers. I assume he means like asking somebody to the dance.
Is this like the Ferris Bueller thing where we're going to have to like rewatch something to try and figure out what he's talking about?
Yeah. I was kind of trying to figure it out in my head earlier. But yeah, I know the Broncos are doing the work on the back end. I think, as we talked about on my show on Monday night, I think bringing in more weapons for Bo Nix would be the obvious choice. And that's essential for Bo Nix's success. So, I'm seeing a lot about getting rid of Cortland Sutton. I don't think that's going to happen. But as far as just bringing more guys in, I think there's no harm in dealing a couple draft picks from next season. I know that's been like such a no-no because of the lack of draft picks they've had in recent years. But, if the Broncos can get their 5th win this week, I think why not go for it? It just depends. Like, a lot of people are saying, you're a little bit too early on that. If you're looking at playoffs, that's going to be next season. But I don't think that's true. I think if the Broncos are going to be winning and they have a serious chance at getting a wild card, why not go for it this year?
What you got cooking for KKTV this evening?
Yes, so we'll be talking plenty of Broncos today. We also have Colorado College hockey. They are 2-0. They're ranked 9th in the country now, and they're coming off of a weekend off. So it's a very early bye week for them. Coach Mayotte talking about brushing off the rust. You build up, you you kind of get that mentality with your team during the preseason and you get them ready. You play 2 games, you win, and then you have this weekend off. Well, they're going to Alaska this weekend to play Alaska Anchorage, who only has 1 win on the season. So just talking a little bit about the Tigers, and they got Air Force coming up next weekend, not this weekend, but next weekend. So the Pikes Peak Trophy will be back up for grabs. So we're really looking forward to seeing what the Tigers are going to do this season.
This is a big hockey house here. So you talking about hockey is music to the ears of my audience. We'll look for that at 5:30 and 10 this evening. Again, Jessica Mendoza joining us on behalf of Prize Picks. Download the app, use promo code Jessica, and you get $50 instantly when you play $5. Jessica, appreciate the time and the insight, and we'll catch up with you soon.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.
Yep. It's Jessica Mendoza, KKTV 11 Sports, my guest here on Drive Time Sports. Good to know that people around the KKTV 11 studios ask if Andy Dalton's showing back up. But honestly, I don't know why I should be like offended by it. I understand, like, we don't look that much alike. I have a better beard than he does. Always going to happen. And I thought by embracing it a couple years ago, dressing up as him for Halloween, like that would be, me kind of owning it. And then I'd be like, okay with it. I'm kind of laughing at myself. And now I just, it's had almost the opposite effect. That's okay. 719-247-1313. Enough of my own personal baggage. I want to jump off of a couple of points that Jessica had made, and you're weighing in on the text line as well, 719-247-1313, regarding whether the Broncos should make a deal before the deadline. And if they don't, what does that say about how they view themselves? Does not making a trade before the NFL trade deadline mean that the Denver Broncos think they're further away than you do? Taking your thoughts, 719 24/7 1313. Tyler texts in, said Broncos rumors Christian Kirk and Kamara both help. Playoff berth is a good season. Well, the Kamara thing was made up like me and a bunch of other people just started talking about it. I talked about it on this show after the Broncos beat the Saints. Like, who would be great? Alvin Kamara. That's from what I've seen. And I don't pretend to scour the darkest corners of the interweb here. But ESPN just put out a big long thing about every team and what they may do at the trade deadline. And the consensus with the Broncos, whether it's national or local, insiders are saying they either stand pat or they listen on guys. That's a very different tone than kind of the conversation around the team, outside of the team, which is this could be a playoff team. This is a team that's got to make a move. So everything I have seen has been just Broncos country talking to itself and saying, wouldn't this guy be awesome? Wouldn't this guy be awesome? Maybe there is somebody that's floated or linked the Broncos to somebody. I just haven't seen it. But yeah, Kamara would have been amazing. He signed an extension today. They're not trading him. Not that I thought they were going to trade him in the first place. But they're not trading him now. Christian Kirk, okay. That's fine. Christian Kirk. I mean, can he cost that much more than DeAndre Hopkins? But I agree with your second part there, Tyler. Yeah, if they get into the postseason, whether they back in there taking advantage of a schedule that has looked weaker as we've gone along because of some of the teams that are down this year that we maybe didn't expect to be this down, that's still amazing that the Broncos got into the playoffs. Like, that's massive. And already I think that the Broncos, unless they go completely down the tubes the rest of the way, and I have enough faith in Sean Payton in this team that they're not going to, fall off a cliff here. They've exceeded expectation. Absolutely. And I think by the end of the year, you'll look back and say, wow, they were over under in Vegas for wins with 5.5. This has been a successful season. They have won some games. They found out a little bit about Bo Nix. They know more about him now than they did before the season started. I don't see a scenario from this point on where we don't look at the Broncos season as a success. But because they've already gotten to that point, now it's like, well, can you do more? And shouldn't you try? And that's the point I'm making. And if you think that the Broncos making the playoffs is a good season, I think that's an understatement. But if that's the goal here now, based on what you've seen, I still feel like this team has got to go get it. I can still see enough teams in the AFC and enough losses on their schedule that I don't think is currently constructed, and from what I have seen so far, that they're going to make it. So they got to add something. Either someone on their team, Bo Nix, needs to unlock another level of skill, or they got to bring in somebody. And then I think they're showing you, the fan, hey, we're going for this thing. We believe we can get into the postseason. If they stand pat, or worst case, they trade somebody, they trade Javonte Williams, they trade Cortland Sutton, that has the opposite effect. That sends the complete opposite message, which is, yeah, we're not as close as you think we are. And by the way, that's okay. If they feel like they're further away and they're not one piece away from competing for, that's fine. But I think that's what it says. Because this year was supposed to be 5.5 wins and get ready for next year. And now it's like it's changed. I'm not bringing this up necessarily as a criticism of the Denver Broncos. Maybe even I'm overvaluing what I have seen from this team. It's possible. But any reasonable prognostication for the rest of the way will still say that based on what you thought this team would be, that they have exceeded those expectations. I'm just saying, if they're going to do the thing that would be unthinkable going into this year, which is the Broncos being a playoff team, they got to go get it. And if they don't, that's fine. But it says that they don't believe they're as close to being a legitimate playoff team as maybe some people talking about them are. But you got to do that. You got to do the self-assessment. And we only see a small fraction of this team in action. Sean Payton, George Payton see this team every day for many more hours than we do. And if they're seeing behind the scenes, like, yeah, maybe we stumble into a playoff spot if some other teams fall by the wayside, but we're not in a way worthy. There's probably a better word, but just like, we're not a playoff team. We're not the Bills. We're not the Ravens. We're not even the Steelers. Houston. But still got time. And the other side, not that I expect this to happen, but let's play the game here a little bit. I would say that I would withdraw not necessarily withdraw, it actually somewhat solidify what I'm saying. If they happen to lose on Sunday, then yeah, no, don't worry about it. Then we see it. You lose to Carolina. Yeah, you're not what we think you are. That's fine. You don't have to make any trades. Do the slow build. Like, that's fine. If they lose to Carolina, all of this talk comes crashing down. I don't think that they will, though. And I said it yesterday. I think that it's more reasonable to expect the Broncos to make Sunday's game look like the New Orleans game than it is for them to lose. (719-24/7) 1313. Tom says, I heard Kamara told Sean Payne, come get me after the game. I think the Broncos have taken a big step. I don't necessarily think the playoffs are super important this year. I think the come get me thing was people trying to fill that in on social media. Because again, he did sign an extension. So I don't know. Maybe it's just, I think if anything, it was more realistic in the offseason, but now he signs an extension. So now it's a little bit more complicated. But again, I agree with you. The playoffs would be great for the Denver Broncos if they got in. But that's why I say making a move addresses a couple of things. One, it says, hey, we're going for it, and we think we have a real shot here. But it also serves the purpose because of the players we're talking about. We're not talking about adding another pass rusher or another corner. We're talking about adding somebody that would also help Bo Nix's development. I agree with you. I don't think it's a must that they make the playoffs by any stretch of the imagination. I think they've already exceeded many expectation. And the most important thing is still knowing what you have in Bo Nix, developing Bo Nix, but making a deal for a David Njoku or a Christian Kirk or a Mike Williams helps that. So it's twofold. So I'm still keeping the main thing. But a trade also has other benefits to it and also signals some other things about how the Broncos feel about themselves. But yeah, it's about Bo Nix's development. That's what it is. Because even if they're a playoff team, you know the standard for this franchise. The standard for this franchise is not 9-8, 10-7. Let's sneak into the playoffs. It's to win the whole thing. And the only way they're going to get there is if Bo Nix becomes that level of a quarterback, or they decide he's not and quickly go get one that is. 719-247-1313. Three stories that are driving the show coming up after the top of the hour. But in the meantime, did you know that you can now use your own body's healing properties to revitalize your achy joints and get you real lasting pain relief? Hello there. Welcome in Drive Time Sports on this Wednesday. Ryan Kaufman with you. Appreciate you listening or watching. If you are listening, whether it's on your radio, online at extrasports1300.com or through the new Extra Sports 1300 app, sponsored by Diversus Health, Mental Health, and Wellbeing for All. I do appreciate it. Kind of a open night, and then things are going to get really nutty. You think the sports calendar is quite full as it is. Tomorrow night we'll add the Nuggets to the mix as they are in action against the Oklahoma City Thunder. Avs in action tomorrow night. Another week of the NFL begins, and then one day after tomorrow, the World Series begins. Plus college football, college hockey. Oh, it is such a magical time of year, is it not? And hard to narrow down the stories that are driving the show. There are so many, but we limit it to 3, and here we go. All right, we start with the Avs for story number 1. Break up the Avalanche.
McCarr gets it towards the net front. It's tipped in by guess who? He cannot be stopped. Kiwi Snipey. Joel Kiviranta has 2 tonight, 3 in 2 games, and the Avalanche have the lead back. Cale Makar, another assist. That's now 13 points on the season for the great number 8.
Connor McGahey on the Altitude Radio Network, which we are a proud part of. And you heard that here on Extra Sports 1300 last night. The Colorado Avalanche look better, continue to look better. And while it is great that Kiviranta is doing his best Ross Colton impression and getting goals in bunches, and it's great that Cale Makar is leading the league in scoring, the story last night was goaltending. Justus Onanen gave up just the 2 shots, and if the game would have ended 30 seconds earlier, not even, like 10 seconds earlier, he would have only given up 1 goal. But right now, Justus Onanen is on a trajectory to take over as the number 1 option in goal for the Colorado Avalanche. And I didn't put a ton of stock into his performance against the Sharks because it is the Sharks after all. But last night, little step up in competition. The Kraken aren't the Detroit Red Wings from the 90s, but they're better than the Sharks, and it looked the same. It looked like a very in control, not nervy, not flailing wildly type of performance from Justus Onanen. Cale Makar called him calm. It's a perfect descriptor for it. It's calm with the Colorado Avalanche. With Georgiev, he was flailing this way and that way and kicking out his leg and throwing out the stick. And with Onanen, it's no wasted movement. Slides a little bit to his right, slides a little bit to his left, drops down, goes high. It looks better. And the analyst on the ESPN broadcast last night, I think, had the perfect way to sum it up. You know, sometimes when it comes to a goaltender, you have to make a decision based on the way the guys look in front of them. And the guys in front of Justus Onanen look comfortable. They don't look like they're pressing. They don't look like they're worried. And if there's not a large talent discrepancy between your 2 goaltenders, and if you don't have a ton of money invested in one over the other, which both of those boxes are checked because Georgiev isn't a ton more talented than Justus Onanen. I think he is more talented. And both guys are free agents after the year. If you got to trust your eyes. And my eyes say that everything operationally works better right now with Justus Onanen. So I was glad to see that Jared Bednar said he's going to be in between the pipes again against Utah, and that will be another step up in competition. I'm not there yet to say unequivocally Justus Onanen should be 1A or the guy or however you want to characterize it, but we're trending in that direction. We're getting closer. And tomorrow night will be another checkpoint there. And the way I feel right now, if it's the same way against Utah, I think maybe I will be there. And then the question is, okay, Onanen's the guy. Is he good enough to win a Stanley Cup? Not quite there yet, but trending in that direction. Avs, 3 straight wins, look to make it 4 in a row tomorrow night in Salt Lake City. Story number 2 is a change at quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. Dave Canales announcing earlier today that in the car accident that Andy Dalton had yesterday, he injured his thumb and will not be able to play on Sunday. So now, if nothing else, the interest level in Sunday's game goes up a little bit, right? And I guess given the audience I'm speaking to, you're probably going to tune in. But now it's like you add the whole Bryce Young is back on the field dynamic to this. Sunday's game just got a whole lot more interesting because I'll be quite honest with you. With the Avs going and the Nuggets starting up and CU doing what they're doing, it's like I don't know how much time I was going to dedicate to the Carolina-Denver game. But now you're throwing Bryce Young into the mix? Makes it more interesting. Now, as far as the Broncos' chances on Sunday, I do think it, and I said this yesterday, it goes up because you're going against a quarterback that's not that different than the one you just threw around like a rag doll on Thursday. Right? At least with Andy Dalton, there's some veteran guile there. There's some lack of panic. With Bryce Young, why can't the Denver Broncos do exactly to him what they did to Spencer Rattler? I don't see any reason why they couldn't. Now, Dalton, Bryce Young, Cam Newton, Broncos should win on Sunday. That's not the debate here. But I think it even more goes to what I was saying yesterday about this should look like the Saints game. They should win with some style points. And if the whole book on Bryce Young was that he was panicky, he was nervous against pressure that other teams are putting on him, no one's better at creating pressure than the Denver Broncos. So more interesting, but also even more so that the Denver Broncos should take care of business and look good doing it come Sunday. By the way, the line has moved even more in the Broncos' favor on Circa Sports Colorado app. They are a 10-point favorite. Lines don't get that big. Not in the NFL. In college football, sure. Not in the NFL. Vegas is expecting an absolute beatdown. And even more so of one now that Bryce Young has been named the starting quarterback of the Carolina Panthers. Let's stick with the NFL for story number 3.
Levis looks, pumps, steps up, looks, throws, caught, touchdown, Titans, DeAndre Hopkins.
That is WGFX on the call. One of the last times you will hear DeAndre Hopkins, probably the last time you will hear DeAndre Hopkins catch a touchdown pass from Will Levis, because now he's going to be catching touchdown passes from Patrick Mahomes. Widely reported today that the two sides have agreed to a deal that will send Hopkins to Kansas City. The return for Tennessee will be a conditional 5th that can turn into a 4th round pick. And I am here to tell you that if you think that this is the missing piece and you're like, oh, now the Chiefs are going to three-peat, you have to be honest with yourself and say that you already thought they were going to. DeAndre Hopkins is not your former self of 5 years ago, DeAndre Hopkins. Okay? The Titans unloaded him for a 4th round pick, essentially. Okay? Is he a good fit with the Kansas City Chiefs? Absolutely. Absolutely. They're going to be running those slant patterns, and Mahomes is going to be able to hit Hopkins over the middle. Like, it's a good fit. And given the state of affairs with the Chiefs wide receiving core, he is now their best healthy receiver. But I look at this a lot like I look at the Davante Adams deal for the Jets. Like, yes, I expect the Jets offense, their passing game, to be better with Davante Adams than it was before they got Davante Adams. But is that really addressing the weakness of the Jets? Or in their case, weakness says no. For the Kansas City Chiefs, their biggest weakness is the tackles. And you're not going to be able to throw slant routes to DeAndre Hopkins on every down. This does not actually address the biggest weakness of the Kansas City Chiefs. And if they meet up with the team in the Super Bowl like the one they faced in 2020, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they could lose. DeAndre Hopkins is not the missing piece of the puzzle. DeAndre Hopkins is not going to turn a team destined to fail to three-peat into a sure three-peat. It's just not. So you don't have to, I see so much panic. And how could the league let the Chiefs do this? First of all, the Titans don't care because they are so far away from being any good that it does not matter if they make the Chiefs better. And secondly, this won't make the Chiefs what they were with Tyreek Hill. It's not. If you think that, then you already believe that the Chiefs are going to three-peat. And you're just looking for this to be another reason why you think. It's not going to put them over the top. Either they're going to three-peat yesterday and are going to three-peat today, or they weren't going to yesterday and they're not going to today. DeAndre Hopkins doesn't change the narrative that much. Take your thoughts on the 3 stories that are driving the show. 719-247-1313. 719-247-1313 is the number if you want to get in, converse, give your thoughts. More thoughts from you when it comes to the Broncos. Should they make a move? Will they make a move? What does it say about them if they don't make a move? From the 719, stay the path. I feel like 8 wins, maybe 9, 10 gets in. No reason to mortgage any future for a one and done in the playoffs. Now, I would argue that, you know, a David Njoku, for instance, would be more of a long-term investment. Perhaps like an Amari Cooper, who is, I mean, there's a chance the Bills could sign him, obviously, but he is set to become a free agent. And it's interesting that, at least on the text line, the general feeling that I'm getting is the Broncos don't have to make a move. That people are happy with where they are, where they're going, and they don't have to make a move to win you over or to, win you over. Or to make this season worth it. Which, by the way, I think that's a great space to be in. Because I do think that you're seeing enough right now that you're like, they're on the right path. They're doing the right things. They're not a finished product. They're going to have to improve this roster. But for the first time in forever, there looks to be a plan in place. And I think that's the big thing with any fan base. I mean, for Pete's sake, Sixers fans were all about the process. Right? Think about that. There was a fan base that was all on board with the team doing nothing to win and coming up just short of intentionally losing basketball games. And they loved it. You know why? Because it was a plan. It was an actual, hey, this is how we're going to improve ourselves, how we're going to get back to being a playoff team, to hopefully a championship contender. That's what fans want. And looking at it locally, that feeds a lot of the frustration with the Rockies, who are now the one major professional sports team in the state of Colorado that doesn't seem like they have a plan. That's what's infuriating to so many people. If you want to be bad, be bad. If you want to go out and spend money on Chris Bryant, then spend money on pitchers and other position players. Like, pick a lane. Tell us what the plan is. And fan bases, because of their desire for their team to win, will buy in. And they'll be patient. That's part of what's gone wrong with the Broncos. It's like, okay, we're going to go with Simeon. Right? Okay. You get on board with Simeon. Well, now we're going to Paxton Lynch. Okay, even better, young quarterback. Well, now we're going to go with Case Keenum, and we're going to bring in a free agent. Okay, we're going to get back. The Broncos have been so all over the place, flip-flopping back and forth. Do we want to draft a quarterback? Do we want to sign a veteran 1 year to the next? Drew Lock's still on the team, but yet they go Teddy Bridgewater. Was that a plan to improve, or was that a plan to save Vic Fangio's job? That's the frustration with the Denver Broncos. At least with Bo Nix and everything coming out of the Denver Broncos, they're committed to this guy. And also, what you've seen from Bo Nix, you're like, I want to see more. With Paxton Lynch, I think people were done with him as quickly as he arrived. Just as an organization, have a plan. Even if it's we're going to suck intentionally for 3 or 4 years so we get high draft picks, cool. Set expectation and stick to it. Real actionable things. And I think that's the sense I'm getting is while all this is great, that this team seems to be better than many people prognosticated them to be, they don't have to swing big because there is a real plan in place that people can get behind. Speaking of which, it does seem like Deion Sanders' plan to get the Colorado Buffaloes back to winning is progressing nicely. This past weekend, Colorado won another road game by more than 27 points. A little fun with numbers here. That is the first time that Colorado has won back-to-back road games by that many points or more in 37 years. So, yeah, it's been a while. Why have the Colorado Buffaloes looked so good lately on the road? Deion Sanders explains.
I like to be booed and they say it and hate it. That turns us on. Turns us on. It's kind of sexy, matter of fact. That's how I felt when I played. I mean, I love to be on the road and get booed and they say it and hate it on it. I think we like being the underdogs and we like being those type of people. Not that we don't look at the betting line or whatever. Underdogs meaning on the road, away from home. But we like that. We like that.
And that is the mentality he brought in. And it was the right mentality. And it was the right mentality in large part because this program was the biggest underdogs, perhaps, in Division I. There's a legitimate case to be made that before Deion Sanders arrived at CU, they were the worst team in Division I football. And if they weren't the worst, they were close enough. So he came in and he instilled this us against the world mentality. Nobody believes in us, and it's powerful. It's probably one of the most powerful messages that you can deliver to your team. No one believes in us. Let's shock the world. Let's prove them wrong. But there comes a time for every team, regardless of sport, regardless of level, where you're going to be successful. And that is going to ring hollow because you're not underdogs anymore. And you see even the teams that are on top try to manufacture, oh, no one believes in us. You'll hear that a lot. And you look at some teams and you're like, no, we believed in you. We believed in you. Don't say that. You're not underdogs. Stop it. But it's such a powerful mentality to have as an athlete and as a team that you want to have it even when you're experiencing success. The problem is even you get to a point where you can't believe that yourself. Right? There comes a time where you're like, yeah, actually, I'm really good and we're really good. We're the favorites. We're expected to win. And you can't even do some crazy Svengali psychology on yourself to make you believe that you're actually underdogs. And that's another step in the evolution of any athlete or any team, is dealing with success, handling it, and say, even though I know that I'm expected to succeed here, I'm going to bring the same effort level. That's really what it's about. It's not about mentality that you have to tell yourself that every single week, even if you're playing Little Sisters of the Poor community college, that no one believes you'll win. But you have to stay even keeled. You have to be like, whether we're expected to win or whether not, our effort level, our execution level is not going to change. But you notice still a pattern with this CU team that just when everybody jumps back on the bandwagon, this team disappoints and everybody jumps off the bandwagon. And then it's back to no one believes in us. And they perform well and everybody jumps back on the bandwagon. At some point, when everyone jumps back on the bandwagon, they got to have a reason to not jump off of it. And the only way that happens is if the Colorado Buffaloes continue to win football games. After the UCF game, Deion Sanders, or is that after Kansas State, but it was in reaction to the UCF game. Guys started reading their own press clippings, starting to believe that maybe they could just step out onto the field. And that was enough to win games. And they didn't bring the requisite execution level, especially on the defensive side when it comes to the running game. And they got absolutely ran over by Kansas State. And Deion talked about it after the Kansas State game, that this team started buying into the hype, started thinking that they didn't need to have that underdog mentality, and it bit them in the butt. And then they actually could put that chip back on their shoulder. And they played extremely well against Arizona and dominated that football game. So now history repeats itself, recent history. Arizona game like the UCF game. That makes the Cincinnati game like the Kansas State game. Same venue, Folsom Field, at home, in front of the home fans, spending a whole week hearing about how good you are and your path to the Big 12 title game. CU needs to handle all of that better than apparently they did going into the Kansas State game. And Cincinnati's not as good of a team as Kansas State. But what we have seen is in the Big 12, nothing can be taken for granted. A team like Oklahoma State that many thought would challenge for the Big 12 title looked terrible through the first couple of weeks. And then they popped up and they nearly knocked off unbeaten BYU. Right? UCF looks like world beaters. And then CU absolutely demolishes them. CU looks like they're rolling. Kansas State game happens. This conference is nuts. And any given week, anyone could beat anybody except Iowa State. I have yet to see that Iowa State is vulnerable. But BYU, unbeaten BYU, vulnerable. They still won, but they showed that they could be beaten. So does CU bring not necessarily the mentality that they have on the road? Because it's hard to replicate. But do they bring the requisite effort level, execution level to take care of business against a team in a game that they absolutely should win. Because if they don't, this conference has shown that you will pay for it. And I don't think that Deion Sanders or this program wants to keep riding this roller coaster. Win a game you're supposed to win in dominating fashion. Do what you did against Arizona and against UCF, where nobody thought you would win or nobody thought you would look that good. Do it when you're expected to. It's another level that is a team has to go to, dealing with success and still being the same team week in and week out. And right now, we don't know if CU can handle prosperity. Because it seems like anytime they achieve prosperity, something bad happens. They are favored to win Saturday against Cincinnati. A win would get them to bowl eligibility. They are favored by 5 points on Circa Sports Colorado, the app of choice of yours truly. Why? Because like that game and so many others, they're minus 110 split, unlike other sports books that routinely use minus 115, minus 120. They keep as little money as possible on large market bets like futures, golf tournaments. They don't limit players based on their winnings. And they have the best customer service you're going to find with the Sportsbook app because they're real people answering your questions. It's all about the experience with Circa Sports Colorado. And that's why they are now my sports betting app of choice. And I think if you try them, you'll feel the same way. Download the Circa Sports Colorado app today, where it's better for the better. Must be 21 years or older and present in Colorado to bet. Gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. The second night of the NBA season tips off nowish. Sixers and Bucks to be followed by the Suns and Clippers. I thought that last night's slate in the NBA was littered with storylines. And you don't have to like the storylines to acknowledge that they are indeed storylines. And I'm referring to LeBron and Bronny. But you had that. You had JJ Redick in his first game, and he's already calling for the NBA to use worn-in basketballs. So JJ Redick trying to make an immediate impact by saying, let's not use brand new basketballs. He's a disruptor. I can't call him anything other than that. And then you have the new look Knicks and the defending champion Celtics. And the defending champion Celtics absolutely obliterated the New York Knicks to the point where Josh Hart called for the NBA to drug test the Celtics players. In jest, of course. You can't win a title. You can't win much of anything or really even lose anything in game one. But that doesn't mean you can't make a statement. And I think last night, the Boston Celtics made a statement. It was intentional. It felt personal the way they played last night. Right? Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown based on all the Olympic stuff. They had that, and then everybody's fawning over Karl Anthony Towns on the New York Knicks, and they're coached by an absolute psychopath in Joe Mazzulla. Yeah, that was intentional. The Celtics were out to make a statement last night. And quite honestly, as impressed as I was with their performance, I didn't think they needed to make a statement. They didn't lose a Bruce Brown from the team. Like, everybody's back. I think the Celtics are going back to the finals. I absolutely think they will. You're not going to find a doubter in me. Yeah, I think the Celtics are going back. But in case you thought maybe they weren't, here's what many people think is the biggest threat to the Celtics, and the Celtics dominated them. Is it possible? We don't get many of these. We talk about trades that are win-wins. We talk about trades that one team fleeces another. Is it possible that the Knicks-Wolves trade is actually a lose-lose? Some people are asking that question after last night. The Knicks got boat raced by Boston with Karl Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges. How quickly we forget that Mikal Bridges is also a member of the New York Knicks and is supposed to be the guy that can stop either Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown. Didn't last night. And then Anthony Davis took one look at the Minnesota Timberwolves front line with Gobert and Randall instead of Gobert and Towns and proceeded to destroy it. Did both teams lose the trade? But I've said, it needs time. It just does. It's not going to look great immediately. And there are countless cases of this throughout recent NBA history. It takes time. It could be as radical of a change as what Miami went through when LeBron and Chris Bosh went down there. It can be, something like what the Knicks have done, adding 2 players that aren't LeBron and Chris Bosh, but are fairly significant pieces, or the Wolves adding Randall, and it all takes time. Now, that doesn't mean that I wasn't, to a degree, surprised by what Boston did to New York, but I understood going into it last night. It would take some time for this Knicks team to look like the team I think has now legitimately become a threat to Boston. Not this year, but in the next couple of years. But I think and I mentioned it when Jessica Mendoza joined me last hour. Like, I think you can read a little bit into what Anthony Davis did to the Wolves last night. I do, because when they made the move, what do we talk about? They're not as formidable going up against the Denver Nuggets as they were when they had Karl Anthony Towns. It's just the fact of the matter. And Anthony Davis, who isn't as good as Nikola Jokic, who isn't as dominant, went right at him with no fear, no hesitation, and did whatever he wanted last night. It will get better between Gobert and Randall. But if you're a team like the Nuggets that have the most dominant big man in the league, and you're also position for position at the same level as the Minnesota Timberwolves, because that's the thing that the Lakers are going to find out. Like, the Lakers 1 through 5 or 1 through 8 are just not nearly as talented as the Wolves. But you throw the Denver Nuggets in there. I don't think that the Minnesota Timberwolves are way worse than they were a year ago, but they're not as difficult of a matchup for the Denver Nuggets as they were last season. Now, we'll get into it tomorrow with the Nuggets opening up, all of their question marks, all of their storylines, because the Nuggets, it's not like the Nuggets can just say, all right, we're going to get through the Wolves no matter what in a 7-game series. That's not true. They need to do some things. But the matchup, and that's what we found out in the playoffs last year, matchups matter. Who you play. It's not always about this team A is more talented than team B. It's about how you match up. And I don't think the Wolves match up as well with the Denver Nuggets. And you got a little glimpse into it last night with what Anthony Davis did to them. Now, this game that I'm watching, Philly up 8-4 on Milwaukee, somehow, some way, without Joel Embiid. The NBA is going to investigate. And when you see that headline from the engagement farmers, thank you, JJ Redick, again, for that great moniker for ESPN. When the engagement farmers get going, they are really good at what they do. And you see the NBA is going to investigate the Sixers and Joel Embiid. And you go, ooh. They do this for everybody. If you are a star player, a superstar player, and they have these, you have to be an MVP or make an all-star game or whatever. If you miss the game, they're going to investigate what comes out of it. Right? What the Sixers did not playing Joel Embiid tonight, and Paul George, by the way, triggers an investigation. But we know, like, this is why it is so, there's no teeth to this. Daryl Morey and Joel Embiid have both said that Joel Embiid is probably not going to play back-to-backs. You're telegraphing that you are load managing Joel Embiid. What can the NBA do about it? Nothing. So it's about vigilante justice. It's about you and I punishing the Sixers by saying, you are not a title team. Joel Embiid is not a centerpiece of a franchise if he can't play back-to-backs. And how many ramp-ups does this guy need? Because that's what they're saying. He needs to ramp up. How many ramp-ups does Joel Embiid need? Didn't he just need a ramp-up for the Olympics? Oh, don't read too much into the fact that Joel Embiid looks terrible for Team USA. He needs to ramp up. He needs to get his conditioning up. What is this guy doing in the time between the NBA season, the Olympics, and now the Olympics and the NBA season? Then he needs another ramp up. Well, he's banged up. He's out of shape. He needs to ramp. Like, come on now. Can we? What arguably best player in the NBA have we ever said any? We destroy Anthony Davis because he gets hurt too much. And yet with Joel Embiid, he cannot play back-to-backs. He can have ramp-ups for everything. He needs a ramp-up for a pickup game. Oh, give me 3 or 4 pickup games, and then I'll be ready for the real pickup game. Like, come on now. He needed a ramp up before the Olympics. Can we stay ramped up? Can we continue on the ramp? Can we stay ramped? Is there any way to do that with the advances in sports science? I don't know. Maybe it wasn't a good idea that Joel Embiid played in the Olympics. I know you can't stop the guy, but maybe it wasn't a good idea. Maybe Joel Embiid, instead of riding the coattails of Steph Curry, KD, and LeBron James, maybe he just should have enjoyed it from the comfort of his own home like the rest of us and be ready for a very important season in Sixers history. Just my opinion. Before I go, speaking of getting back to the best that you can be, if you're feeling tired, lacking motivation and drive, gaining weight, noticing a loss of muscle mass, these could all be signs of low testosterone. It's not your fault. Happens to men of a certain age. But I'm here to tell you that the best thing you can do is go to Low T Center to get your levels checked. It's a simple test, 25 minutes, you'll get it back and you'll know. And if it is low testosterone, know you're in the right place because they're not your typical doctor's office. Their physicians specialize in treating low T with testosterone replacement therapy for each patient. And the variety of ways that they can do it, including self-inject physician-monitored treatments that ship directly to your home. But the first step is to make that appointment. Go to lowtcenter.com to book your appointment. That's lowtcenter.com. Get back to your best. Low T Center, reinventing men's healthcare. It has been my pleasure to serve you today. My thanks to Jessica Mendoza for joining me. Tomorrow, we will be busy. Hopefully, you'll join me at 3 here on Extra Sports 1300.